Hi, everyone. I am really excited about the topic that I am going to be touching on today. This is really my area. I could geek out on this. I love talking about neurodivergency. I love talking about the brain and how we as providers can really not only support the brain diversity, but how can we celebrate, accommodate, and make sure that we are being affirming in our approaches when working with clients that may learn in different ways, may interact in the world with different ways, and what that means and what supports we can put in place. So, with that, let me do a quick introduction of my background and how I came to do this work. But a little bit about me: I'm currently a child and adolescent therapist. Amongst many other things that I do, I specifically work with neurodivergent clients. What does this look like? It might be autistic clients, ADHD clients, clients with different learning profiles. And this is my area. Why? Not only is this my niche in my clinical work, but I also worked in school settings for almost a decade. And I also have a background in special education. So this niche area is really where my two passions come together. A little bit more about me: I really love the brain. In my office, you will see brains everywhere. I have shirts that say neuro nerd. I have shirts with the brain. I am really focused on how clinicians can support specifically neurodivergent students in academic or educational settings. I work from a strengths based approach, and I do a lot of collaboration. This work cannot be done in isolation. It involves working with parents, it involves working with providers, it involves working with teachers, school professionals. It just takes a village for this type of work. And I think that not only being aware of neurodiversity and neurodivergent individuals, but accepting and celebrating diverse minds is really the way forward as we do this work. So, a little bit about our learning objectives for today. Participants will be able to define the terms neurodiversity, neuronormative, and neurodivergent. We're going to break those down a little bit. There is actually generally some misconceptions about what those mean. Participants will be able to help students or adults, any individual, identify and articulate their preferred learning styles and specific learning needs. And lastly, participants will be able to identify supports for neurodivergent students in respectful and empowering ways that help them to thrive academically and personally. Knowledge is really power as we talk about this. So, let's kind of get our bearings here of when we're using these terms. It is a hot term right now. We're talking about neurodiversity, neurodivergence, neuronormativity, neurotypical. What does this mean, right? So we're going to really frame things today from this idea called the neurodiversity paradigm. This is part of human variation. Just as there's diversity with many other things, the brain can be diverse as well. It moves away from seeing this as more of a disability, and it talks about how we can have different neurotypes, how brains can operate differently, specifically for different neurotypes such as autism, OCD, ADHD, and emphasizing that there's differences. There's nothing wrong with these differences. This is natural, and this is part of what makes, I think, brains so cool. It's a big shift, right? A lot of times we're trying to pathologize, we're trying to say you should change your behavior. That's not what this paradigm is about. This paradigm is about shifting that focus from trying to cure or help neurodivergent individuals, and it moves from that to trying to embrace this. What are these amazing strengths that they have? Because if you have people that think differently, you're going to have more creative solutions. You're going to just be able to expand that diversity of thought, which is needed. That is needed. And what does this paradigm suggest? That therapists, clinicians, people working with neurodivergent individuals, and just FYI, if you are working with any individuals, you will encounter working with neurodivergent individuals. And it's about finding ways for them to sync with their natural neurological wiring and help them heal from internalized ableism and oppression. I just want to break that down a little bit more. This is huge. How do we do this, right? There are so many systems that are not set up or designed to support neurodivergent individuals. School systems, workplaces. There's a big movement to really work towards accommodating differences and supporting differences. But a lot of times our society has worked from this ableist model and have oppressed those that are neurodivergent. And there's varying degrees of this, and each client is going to be different. Each student's going to be different in how these messages have been sent to them throughout their life. So that's really where I want us to ground our work today. Is there's this neurodiversity paradigm, and it's really a way of shifting your thinking. It's moving from that deficit-based model to a model where we're accepting, we're celebrating, and we're understanding neurodivergence, neurodiversity. Okay, there's a lot of terms out there, but what do these terms mean? I have a lot of people say, "Oh, I work with neurodiversity." If you work with neurodiversity, that means you work with people. Because what does neurodiversity mean? There's diversity in human minds. So if you work with people, you're working with neurodiversity, because not one mind is going to be the same. There's diversity of human minds. And neurodiversity is just basically recognizing this. There's variations in brain functions. This is natural. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's valuable. I like to think that if there are 100 people in a room that think the same, you're probably going to not get very much variation in solutions. If you have neurodivergent thinkers, what's really cool about this is you're going to have different and creative solutions. They maybe think or see things in a different way. We need this. So that's the term neurodiversity. It is not to be confused with neurodivergent, which we will define in just a moment here. But what does neuronormative or neurotypical mean? I don't love this term, and I'll explain why in just a second, but this is the jargon that is out there. Neuronormative or neurotypical refers to brain functions that align with societal standards of what's considered typical. That just means society said this is what's typical. If you deviate from this, you are neurodivergent, right? And if there was a bell curve, neurotypical would be most people in that majority. And this is how most people, majority's neurological configuration falls. Neurodivergent falls outside of that. So I don't love the term, because I think, how can we have a typical brain or a typical neurotype? Because every brain is wired differently. It's a very complex organ. What does neurodivergent mean? Neurodivergent is individuals whose neurological functions, so this is within the brain, deviates from that majority. So we're seeing that bell curve. It's people that don't fall, or their neurotype does not fall under that majority. What are examples of this? Autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's. There are many terms that fall under this umbrella, which we will talk about in just a second. And here, people are like, well, what falls under it, what doesn't? Respect where people are in this journey, right? We're not here to say, no, you don't belong to part of this group, right? We have to be accepting, and we have to know that this is a spectrum of different neurotypes that would fall under the umbrella. So brains are cool. I love brains. Like I said, I can talk about this forever. This comes from the work of Doyle and McDowell. It's 2021, right? We are really moving into a time when this is at the forefront of discussion, which is great. So here are examples of some neurominorities that would fall under that neurodivergent neurotype. Dyscalculia, dyslexia, ADHD, Tourette's, acquired neurodivergence. This is really interesting, right? What if there was some sort of brain injury or some sort of chronic illness that changed someone's neurotype? Learning disabilities and mental health can also fall under some of these neuro minorities. Autism, dyspraxia, or DCD also falls under that. What does this mean? What's really cool here, it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm going to talk through these different neurominorities a little bit more. Dyscalculia, this is when someone has difficulties with numbers, where they might struggle in math, putting together equations might be difficult. Dyslexia, this is when written word generally is difficult for someone. I'm not going to go into the details here. School might be difficult due to some of the challenges someone with dyslexia has. ADHD, this is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This could be having hyperactivity or inattention or difficulty focusing on a task for a long period of time. Tourette's syndrome, this could be characterized by tics, and that can look like a variety of different things. We talked a little bit about acquired neurodivergence, learning disabilities. This can be, there's a whole spectrum of learning disabilities that could fall under this. Mental health, right? Mental health, we know enough now that it can change the brain makeup, right? Trauma can do that. So there's talk of that. Autism, someone that is autistic might struggle with typical, I like to put that in quotes, social situations. They might struggle to understand nuances in social situations. They might have very, very deep interest in certain things. And then dyspraxia is with speech. Might be difficulties with speech there. So these are some things. What's really cool about this is where you see in this image where there is the overlap are there really cool strengths, which is awesome. So let's highlight some of those strengths. Verbal skills, creativity, authentic, hyper-focus, innovative thinking, resilience, emotional expression, sensory awareness, and honesty. So I like to definitely do a reframe to let's focus on the strengths here. And there are so many strengths that everyone has if we just take the time to understand and see them. Okay. I'm going to try here to play a video for you all. Now we're going to see a quick video that describes neurodiversity.
Just like our fingerprints, all our brains are unique. But for the majority of people, their brains are similar enough that there are largely no obvious differences in how they function. They have differences in things like skills, preferences, and styles. But mostly, their brains mean they perceive the world in the same way. But for others, their brains are more fundamentally different. They have differences in things like social understanding, sensory processing, communication, and information processing. These differences are a result of neurological differences such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and more. This natural variation in our brains is called neurodiversity. Those of us with no neurological conditions are neurotypical, and those of us with neurological conditions are neurodivergent. Neurodivergent people think differently. Their unique perspectives and experiences mean they can often excel at creativity and innovation, have highly specialized skill sets, and an ability to hyperfocus. If embraced, this can be a huge advantage to organizations and society. However, the differences neurodivergent people experience can make life challenging. In order to thrive at work, they often need some simple accommodations. For example, a sensory calm environment to recharge in, or a routine with the same start and end times. Approximately 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent. So not only is embracing neurodiversity critical for a truly inclusive organisation, but it also presents organisations with a huge opportunity.
So I think there was some really good points in that video. What I like is that it's very strengths based and it talked about just a few basic accommodations. It was focused on the workplace, but this could be anywhere that can be made for folks that are neurodivergent. Some were a sensory calm environment, so making sure that there are sensory opportunities for someone that might need more sensory input or less sensory input. Routines can be very good. So, is the start and stop time the same for the individual? Or sometimes people need a less structured work schedule where maybe they work 8 hours, but they're defining what those 8 hours are. And what I really think is a good highlight that they pointed out is that 1 in 7 people are neurodivergent. So, like I said, if you work with people, you work with someone that is neurodivergent. So, I think this is really important stuff. Now, we're going to shift gears to talk about neurodiversity in the academic setting and how can we support neurodivergent individuals in an academic setting. So this would be great for anyone that works in educational settings, higher education. Also knowing this also can be applicable to workplace settings as well. So what does it look like in the academic setting? For students, there may be learning differences. We talked about this. There might be dyslexia, dyscalculia, so dyslexia affects reading and writing. There's dysgraphia as well. Dyscalculia impacts math skills. And these would probably be points in the school day that are challenging for students, individuals. Attention variability. So we know that school requires a lot of mental energy. So someone with ADHD might, I always have this here, as you can see, in might and can, and I have it in italics because not everyone's going to have the same profile. So someone with ADHD may have attention challenges and might be difficult to focus for long periods of time or to stay organized. What I like to say for folks with ADHD, as someone who has ADHD themselves, it's not that we can't focus, we don't know what to focus on. So sometimes, like, if you hear something outside the window, maybe right now it's currently raining where I'm at, I might be focused on hearing the raindrop, where someone that is neurotypical can tune that out, and does not focus on that. So someone with ADHD just might be taking in a lot of different sensory inputs and has difficulty filtering out what they need to filter out. Social communication. Someone that is autistic can have social interaction challenges or have difficulty with communication skills. Sensory sensitivities. This is pretty common amongst neurodivergent folks. This might be, like we discussed, they might have heightened sensitivity to maybe sounds, smells, different textures, or they might be undersensitive to them and they might need movement. They might need more sensory opportunities. So, all important things to think about, especially when you're working with children in an academic setting. Are they having access to the sensory tools that they need, right? Are they in a space in the classroom that's going to work best for their learning profile? And then emotional and behavior differences, they may experience difficulty with regulating emotions. They might have difficulty calming down when faced with big feelings. This can impact their learning and social interactions. It all depends. It all depends. So now let's talk a little bit about learning styles. This is just kind of a basic. This could be for any age person, but we all learn differently. We all take in information differently because we know we have diverse brains. So there are different types of learning, and I preface this by saying this is just really an outline to help us understand what different ways people may learn. And you might be a combination of these things. So, as we're going through these, I definitely encourage you to think of your own preferences as well. And what ways do you learn best, right? We're going to go through them. And there's actually tools out there. I can link some as well of where you can go to take tests to determine what type of way you learn best. I will say this can change, right? Some days I'm a more of a visual learner, other days I'm popping in my AirPods and doing podcasts. It all depends. But we're going to go through these different styles of learning. And I just want you to be really mindful, maybe think of a student or an individual that you work with and ways that you could really tap into their different learning styles. Okay. We have visual or spatial learners. What does this mean? Those who are visual or spatial learners, they might prefer images. I am a big visual learner. I like colored pens. I like colored sticky notes. I like to make doodles. I really like images. I will remember images when I'm going to study. So, students that are individuals that are visual or spatial learners, they are going to do well with diagrams, charts, videos. They might be very creative. So, they might be making their own tools here. They might be making pictures. They might be making is part of it as well. But they're very drawn to the visual inputs that they're getting as part of their learning profile. We have auditory learners, and this is auditory musical because sometimes music might be a good way for someone to learn. I have some people that have to have music. It is essential, and other people have to have it completely silent when they are learning or taking in information. So auditory learners learn best through sound, music. This might be podcasts. This might be if someone's lecturing, they can actually pick up on that. YouTube videos, right? They learn best through listening, discussions, musical rhythms. They can really get the input and the information they need through the way sound travels and how that is being received by their brain. Verbal or linguistic learners, they prefer to learn through speech and writing. So these might be people that are strong writers or people that have strong oratory skills, and speaking is really the way that is they're going to be able to highlight their strengths. So this might be reading, like we said, writing, participating in discussions. Those that are like, I really like discussions. Verbally, I'm able to express myself and I can take in what other people are saying verbally. So active discussions are going to be effective for these type of learners. Then we have our physical learners, our kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing. Their bodies need that actual physical outlet, and they need to do hands-on things. So these learners prefer to use their body. They might be moving. They might need, and this might be someone in the classroom that needs to stand up. This might be an adult that needs a standing desk. This might be someone that needs to take a break in the hallway every so often because their bodies just need to move. So hands-on activities are going to be great for these type of learners. These might be people that like to build and do, and maybe they are someone that's really good at doing that IKEA furniture put together that I am not great at. They might like experiments. They might like field trips where they can go out and really explore and touch and feel. Role playing might be beneficial for these students. So you might be say, okay, let's talk about this situation. That might not land for them, but you might say, okay, let's act this out. Role playing could be very helpful for them as well. Then we have a few other different types of learning preferences, is what I'll call it. We have those that are logical or mathematical. They might be really strong in logic and reasoning. So they can make sense of complex things using their logic, using their reasoning. Sometimes this has a math component to it. This might be someone that's really strong at puzzles or mind games or mind teasers. They might be able to really easily categorize different elements of information. Abstract concepts might be a strength of theirs, where something's very abstract, but their mind can take that piece, make logic to it, and make sense of it. So there's our logical or mathematical learners. Social learners or interpersonal learners, they learn by connecting. This is so me, right? These individuals prefer to learn in groups or with other people. So they're learning best by maybe they have strong emotional intelligence skills. So they're able to pick up on body language. They're able to pick up on group dynamics. They're able to connect in that way. What this might look like is collaborative learning. So, once again, back to that discussion piece. Maybe it's working together, working on different projects, peer discussions. This could also be helping others through social interactions. So, they might not do best on a test, but maybe if you are having them do something where they are working with people, they're going to excel there. So they would do very well in groups where they're not solitary, they're with others. Then we have those, the complete opposite of the social or interpersonal, that are solitary learners or intrapersonal. They prefer to work alone, right? They're someone that is probably very self-directed, very autonomous, very independent in their learning. This would be someone that would be great to, similar to this, open up a webinar, be able to learn it, follow through, and take note of it on their own. What does this look like? Doing work independently, working on a project solo, taking the time to reflect on one's own autonomous schedule, right? So I'm just taking the time to reflect internally. Self-pacing, that's a skill that's really hard, being able to self-pace. I'd also like to say self-motivating, right? They can just have the internal motivation, intrinsic motivation to go ahead and start something. And that is going to work best for these type of learners. So we talked a lot about what neurodiversity is, what neurodivergent individuals' profiles may look like, knowing that it is completely individualized. It probably will look different for everyone. But okay, now I want to give you the practical things. What do we do to help our neurodivergent learners, individuals? What do we do? What are some practical things we can do? You're probably actually already doing a lot of these things. So I'm just going to give some examples, but I want to preface this by saying every learner is going to be different. So what works for one learner in one situation is not going to work for another learner in another situation. It all depends. So that's our first point here, is it has to be personalized. You really want to personalize the learning approaches to that individual. That is where that ableism and that systematic piece comes in. A lot of times there's not that opportunity to be able to personalize learning to a specific child. Think of if they're in a class with maybe 25, 28 other kiddos with one teacher, that's going to be a very, very, very heavy lift for the teacher to be able to suit every child's individual learning needs. So take that for what it is, but we're going to get into some ways that the child, the student, the individual can self-advocate here. But what's the first step is knowing what their learning style is. A lot of times they're like, I hate school, it's so boring. It's because it's not working for them and they don't know what their learning style is. So that's step one. Knowledge is power. I always say that, right? So what is their individual learning style and what do they need? Are they a visual learner? Okay, maybe they're not a visual learner. Are they a kinesthetic learner? What are the tools that they need to learn best? And I say here, take information from the students themselves. We don't want to assume, oh, this is really working for you, or this is not working for you. Ask them for their input, right? It might be some trial and error, right? I have some kids that are like, fidgets work great for me, and then we trial a fidget and it's actually a distractor, right? Maybe that specific fidget didn't work for them, and or maybe it works in one class setting as the kids get into the older grades, but it doesn't work in another. So important to know what works and what doesn't work and what is realistic, right? Like sometimes what is in an individual student's best interest is not going to be feasible in a school setting, right? Like they can't have their own individual classroom, or sometimes a smaller learning environment is what is best for them, but that's not possible. We know that a lot of times, this is not lost on me, that a lot of times these resources are not available or they cost money, right? Maybe in a private school, this would be more available to someone than it might be in a public school. So just to know that. And sometimes I have to have these conversations with parents and students that the learning environment that you're in right now, the supports you need do not exist. And we process that together, right? Like what's in our control and what's not in our control to give you the resources you need to succeed. So just noting that. Structure can be really helpful for some, right? So maybe they need a visual schedule. Um, Maybe they struggle on days where the schedule shifts. Maybe block scheduling is not the best for them, right? They might need predictability. Predictability oftentimes lessens anxiety for a lot of neurodivergent individuals. We often see on days where it's maybe a half day or we're coming back from a long break or the schedule is just completely flipped on its head, which happens, right? We have to have flexibility. That can be really difficult. Ways that you can provide a predictable schedule is just giving as much heads up notice as possible when necessary. This helps with executive functioning too. Sometimes they're like, I don't know what day turn something in. Calendars can be helpful, planners can be helpful, visual aids can be helpful here. Also, sometimes things happen that come up, like maybe there's a school assembly, or maybe there is going to be a guest speaker that day. Giving kiddos that need the heads up as much possible notice within your control, we can't control everything, is going to be really important too. So predictability actually does help. This is where you can also team up with parents, right? You can say, hey, we're going to have a substitute tomorrow because I know I am taking the day off. I have a wedding. I'm just making something up. The parent then, the teacher can give a heads up to the kiddo, but the parent can also say, hey, you're going to have a substitute tomorrow. Let's problem solve. Let's brainstorm what this might look like. Just even that heads up can be really helpful to create some structure and some predictability, some routine for that student. Assistive technology. This is being used a lot more. I mean, there's so many things that we as adults use probably that we don't even realize, like text to speech. So a lot of students that have difficulty with writing, they might dictate. They might have software. Google Docs does it. There's a ton of stuff that different districts can put on their devices, but they might speak into their device and it captures what they're trying to say. That's really good for dyslexia. It could be really good for those with writing challenges. Visual organizers, right? So maybe there are certain apps that are being used for students. There's tons of learning software out there, and it can be really overwhelming, but sometimes there's accessibility features that can be added onto these different apps, platforms, technologies to help students, to aid their learning. And I do a lot of executive functioning work with kiddos. And I say, I'm going to tell you what I've tried with other people. I am not saying that this must work for you. Let's try it out. So sometimes we might try something out for a week or two and it's like, this is not working, right? Or sometimes with students with ADHD, it's got that novelty for a little bit, for a few weeks, but then after 2 weeks starts to not be as fun anymore. So we might need to find something new. That is okay. What works for the individual learner, what works for the individual student. Build on strengths. I cannot harp on this enough because a lot of times kids that are neurodivergent are the ones that are constantly being criticized. They might be quote unquote acting out or not keeping up, and they internalize that. They get a lot of these messages from the outside world that I'm not doing something right. We don't want them to feel shame or guilt or anything because their brain operates a different way. We want to focus on the strengths. That's why I loved that image that we showed at the beginning of the neurominorities. There's so many strengths that anyone that is neurodivergent has that should and can be utilized to boost self esteem, to boost engagement. I have many, many, many kids that don't want to go to school because they don't feel understood. So we actually have some discussions about what would you like your teacher to know about you? Or what would you like so and so to know that maybe they don't see, right? Because sometimes there's I see often a lot of different presentations, but I often see two big ones. I see kids that are shut down, and not they might seem disengaged. The teacher, oh, they're not engaging at all. They seem like they don't care. And then I see other kids that are maybe quote unquote more acting out, where they're going to be showing more outward behavior, and then the teacher says, oh, that's so disruptive, right? We don't want children to think that they are not being supported for this is their neurotype, this is how their brains work. We want people to understand that and lean into that and support that. Self advocacy, this is such an underrated skill, I think. I tell parents and kids, you have parents with you, right? Like, I can help you for a little bit of time, but at some point you're going to go into this world and be an adult. And you're not going to necessarily maybe have us to help you or advocate for you. So you really want to help them build those self advocacy skills now at a young age, so that they can communicate their needs, they can communicate their preferences. It's so powerful, right? To say, hey, this isn't working for me. I'll give you an example. I have a client that is ADHD, and processing speed is slower. So, and I can talk really fast. So I upfront say, hey, stop me at any time that I'm talking too fast and you are just like, Megan, I need a break. So I was in session and the client stopped me and said, can you give me examples of what you're talking about? And I said, thank you, because in my mind it makes sense to what I'm saying, but it clearly does not. So I gave some more concrete examples that was helpful. Or I gave an open-ended question. I'm giving an example. What'd you do this weekend? Sometimes some neurodivergent learners, that might be too big of a concept, or I don't know how to organize my thoughts to get that out. So a tool, a self-advocacy tool or skill could be, can you give me some options? I've had some clients say that. Can you give me some options? I'm like, okay, did you have sports on the weekend? What'd you do with your family? And that structure was the tool that they needed to be able to make sense of the question. Excellent, excellent, excellent strategies, tools, self advocacy there. Some more things, sensory friendly settings. We talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to give some examples. What ways is the learning environment sensory friendly? What does this mean? I have some students that need to sit away from the window because it's too distracting. They need to sit closer to the teacher so eye contact can be made. They need to sit in different locations. They might need certain seating, right? The stiff chair is not working for them. They might need a wiggle seat, right? Are there certain times of the day that are more stressful for the student? Lunchtime is always one, and recesses always can be a bit overstimulating for some students, some learners, because it's just a lot of different sensory inputs. It's really, if you want to test your sensory skills, go out to an elementary school during lunch or recess, right? It is a lot to take in. So this could be noise minimizing. Maybe the student needs noise canceling headphones, or a lot of kids use now those loop headphones. I always say, if you need it, use it. How about lighting? There are some kids in my office too, and these are all things you can do in your clinical spaces as well, if that is the venue that you are working in. I have a dimming light, so I can go lighter or darker. I have some kids that prefer to sit nearly in the dark, and they're like, this just is a good sensory deprivation for them, right? Where's the space where the client, the student, the learner is going to feel best? Important, important, important. Also, in my therapy office, I have tons of sensory tools. I have a whole box of fidgets. That's like a must. But I do not spray with harsh chemicals, because I know some neurodivergent clients are sensitive to smells. When cleaning is done, it's done when they're not there, or it's very organic, no smelling products. Lighting, like I said, is important. I also have blankets, right? And I'll have some clients that say, hey, can I put this soft blanket on my body? I'm like, sure, right? That's what they need. Pillows. Some people choose to sit on the floor, others choose to sit on the couch. Also, the decor can matter a lot. So, how many of you have ever walked into somewhere and it's just like, whoa, these colors are not working for me. Wow, I can't even concentrate. I have very neutral colors in my office because I had some brighter colors and the clients were giving me feedback. Oh, I don't like this. This is they sometimes say, teens and kids are so honest. This is depressing, or I don't like this. It's making me feel angry, right? Take that feedback. Ask your clients what they think of the settings. Knowing that, you sometimes cannot change the setting, but it's important maybe that this feedback could get to the teacher. Flexible teaching methods, we can't really dictate sometimes what has to be taught and how it is taught. But we know that if we are working individually, maybe we're pulling the client out, or we are even in our sessions, what's going to work best for them. I have some kiddos that every 5 minutes we need to take a break, or our whole session has music. Varying attention spans and learning speeds. I have to really check myself a lot that I'm not talking too fast, especially for processors that may take a little bit more time to not only process the information, but then be able to digest it and give an output, right? I have some kiddos that we tried an hour long session and that was not working. It was just the attention was not there, and that's okay. Time of day matters too, right? Maybe by the end of the day, they're completely mentally exhausted. So maybe we are not going to give as much intense brain work during this time. Also, keep data. Super important for neurodivergent learners is what type of data do teachers take, right? Is the beginning of the day strong, end of the day starts to fade? Is it recess is really challenging? Is it Tuesdays that are really challenging? That is all really good data, so you can kind of piece together what is working and what is not working. Collaboration is key here. We have to work with parents, we have to work with professionals. This could be teachers, this could be administrators, it can be OTs, PTs, everyone. This is a team approach. And I will just say, sometimes you might have a very, very, very different perspective and way of seeing things than another provider. This just goes to say, we bring a very particular skill set as mental health professionals to the table. Sometimes we are the advocates. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, this isn't working. And sometimes I know that, like I said, we can't change some things within the system because we are organisms that live and operate in this world where we are part of systems where all we can do is advocate for change. But you got to collaborate, right? Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And I have noticed that once parents become a little bit more in tune as well to what the child's specific profile is and really accepts that, not tries to change it to what they want it to be or what they think it should be, that's when we start to see some of that really positive growth and some of that really positive change. So, really important that you collaborate and collaborate often. And this could be a process. You might be really working on some of these relationships because you might have some people on board and other people not so much. So, that is really a skill that needs to be built as well. Positive reinforcement goes a long way. And strengths-based, working from strengths-based model goes a long way. So when possible, you want to employ positive reinforcement, even if it's over the smallest thing, right? Like, oh, I really liked that you advocated to sit in a different spot, right? That is a huge skill. So we need to provide reinforcement when possible and really highlight to our students and our neurodivergent folks that you are a great self advocate. No one lives inside your body, your brain, your mind other than you. So we can help you, right? but we cannot help you if we don't know exactly what's going on. So open lines of communication at all points. We really want to get that confidence up, because I see this so often: low self-esteem due to all those things we talked about: ableism, oppression, negative feedback constantly, and just feeling like, what oftentimes I have some clients just say, why can't I do things the way other people can, right? And then there's that shame and that guilt, and it's a lot of confidence and self-esteem. Which, how can you be affirming of this? You create spaces where your clients, your students, your young people, your individuals are free to be who they are. I sometimes will say my session goes no way in what I thought it was, and that's okay, because they had the space to be affirmed, to know that, hey, when you're here, you are here to be yourself, and I'm here to support you in that. Example: I've had kids have big blow ups in my office, right? I I don't ever say you can't come back, right? I say, "Hey, we all have big feelings. We're all working on things. We're all works in progress." So, guess what? I will still be here next week when you return, right? I don't want them to be shamed. I don't want them to think that they can't be themselves. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and we all have areas to improve on. So that's kind of the affirming way that I work from in my settings, and how I can be neurodivergent affirming is I meet clients where they're at. And I stay curious. I stay really, really, really curious. I love to learn more about how their brain works. I love to empower them to learn more about their brains. Like I said, I can nerd out on the brain forever. So, I have included the resources here that I've referenced throughout. I love Neurodivergent Insights. I definitely encourage you to go to neurodivergentinsights.com. It is wonderful. I am on their newsletter because I love to just get perspectives. The person that is in charge of it is neurodivergent themselves, so you get that lived experience perspective, and that is really awesome. And then we talked about some of the different images and statistics and whatnot that I highlighted today can be found here. So go ahead and check it out. I wanted to just touch on very quickly what you might see this infinity symbol a lot in when I talk about neurodivergent affirming care, or when we're talking about neurodivergent individuals. Why? Why do we have this infinity sign? This is really the symbol or the sign that is accepted by the neurodivergent community. And why? Because it's meant to show that diversity of the brain, of wiring, it's normal, it's natural, right? So that's part of it. It shows inclusivity, right? We're accepting all neurotypes. We're accepting of all ways of interacting with the world. There's no right or wrong. And then lastly, it's a sign of unity, right? We are here. We're going to work from that strength space. Let's celebrate. Let's empower one another, and solidarity. So I have this in my office. I definitely encourage you to check out more about the infinity symbol, what it represents, the history of it. And when I have this up, it's similar to the pride flag. It shows that, hey, I see you, I celebrate you, and I'm here for you. And then I liked this image here because you can see there's so many different minds. We have numbers, we have music, we have analytics here. Like, every brain is going to look differently. It is awesome. And I hope that from today you were able to, this was really just an overview of neurodivergence, neurodiversity, what some of that language is. And I will continue to do more topics around this area, and how you can be affirming, how you can really lean into this. And I just once again say, maybe just reconsider a practice that you're doing, or maybe reconsider your office space or your environment. But just take a moment here to reflect on what is one or two ways that you can be more affirming in the way that you approach and accept neurodivergent clients. And of course, I want to thank you for taking the time to tune in today. This is something that is so near and dear to my heart. And I hope that you will tune in for more topics similar to this where we can cover neurodivergence and dive a little bit deeper into the intricacies of the brain. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post-test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.